Good evening and welcome to the Cedar Falls Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for this Wednesday, October 9th, 2019. And David, are you going to do the roll?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Holtz. Atkins? Hartley?
Here.
Holst?
Here?
Larson?
Here.
Leeper? Here. Lynch? Bordeaux? Saul?
Here.
And Wingert?
Here.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, before we get into regular business, I think Iris, you're going to introduce, we have a new person in the planning and zoning staff. Is that
We do, and actually I have an additional announcement as well. So bittersweet news, this will actually be my last P&Z meeting with the city, and actually Friday is my last day with the city of Cedar Falls. I am moving to Michigan to be closer to family, so been an honor working with you and learned a lot, so it's been a pleasure. But I'm just letting you know that yes, it's my last meeting tonight. But on a positive other note, we do have a new planner here today that we'd like to introduce. JD's here in the audience. He won't be presenting, but we'd like to welcome him to our staff and just wanted to introduce him to the commission. Thank you.
okay? Well, we're sorry to see you go, and but best wishes with your future endeavors for sure. Enjoyed working with you for these last couple of years. All right, we'll go on to public comments. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the commission on some on any topic that is not on our actual agenda tonight? If so, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll skip down. We have no old business tonight.
Need to do the minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, David. Yes. Would ask for approval of the minutes or any corrections.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed. That motion carries, so the minutes are approved. Just doing things in random order tonight, apparently. Okay, so no old business tonight. Under new business, we have the first item is a Central Business District facade review for 116 West 4th Street. And Iris, you're going to introduce this item, correct?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Holst. So the owner of 116 West 4th Street is requesting a facade review to update the material on the mansard overhang over both the front and back of the building, of both the entrances. The property is located in the Central Business District overlay. With this type of material change to both the roof and the facade, it does require both planning and zoning as well as city council review and approval. So that's why it's in front of us here tonight. On the slide, you will see an image of the existing front as well as the existing back of the building under consideration today, again, 116 West 4th Street. The applicant is proposing to replace the existing shake shingles on the roofing area with Energy Star black steel roofing, as well as adding new soffits. The steel roofing that is proposed is similar to the awning that's found at 206 Main Street, Little Prairie Girl, an image of which is shown on the bottom of the slide. The remainder of the roof will not be altered, so the structure itself will not change. On the left is a list of the design review criteria from the code that need to be considered with any alteration to a building in the downtown. In this case, only material texture and color are triggered with this type of change. Although metal roofing is not standard in the area of the downtown, the mansard roofing on this site visually appears similar to an awning, and metal awnings do exist within the downtown area, as shown with an example of the Little Prairie Girl. The use of metal on storefronts in the district is permitted, but only in limited amounts. The use of metal in this manner is permitted, and to clarify, metal will only be used on those mansards. The rest of the roof will remain the same, so it'll only be for those two kind of overhang areas. In terms of color, the applicant's proposing to use black, and which is a neutral color and also consistent and compatible with the rest of the district. So the proposal does meet the design criteria of the overlay. With that, staff would like to welcome the applicant up. I believe he brought an example of what the roofing will look like, a material sample through the commission, and then also if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer or try to answer it as well.
Thank you, Iris. Would the applicant or representative, here we go. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Jim Blackledge, Iowa Post Frame Builders. We would be the permit holder to make this change. I wanted to bring this piece up here so that you can see the luster of the steel. It is Energy Star rated. It's also UL rated, class 4 for hail. And so our proposal is to put this, all we're going to do is take the old shakes off the mansard roof that's currently there. There's no structural changes taking place. And then we will apply the steel, and also we will put a new black soffit, non-vented soffit on the underneath part. So, but that gives you a little better idea of the sheen of the steel, and that's why it's called Energy Star. It's reflective.
Very good, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the commission on this item? If so, please come forward, state your name and address. Seeing none, I will bring it back to the commission for comment or a motion.
I think it's a nice improvement from the wood shingles that have probably been there for a while. I would move to approve it.
Great, there's been a moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Yeah, I think it's a nice improvement also, so we'll go ahead and vote. And we have all ayes on that, so that motion carries. Does that go directly to City Council then, Iris?
Yes.
Okay. All right, our next item of business is the Wild Horse Ridge 4th Edition Final Plat, and David, you're introducing this, right?
Thank you, Mr. Holtz. Next item on the agenda is that final plat for the Wild Horse 4th Edition, as located in the Wild Horse Ridge development at the southwest corner of Union Road and West 12th Street. So basically, this property is located in RP zoning district. This is the 4th phase of the Wild Horse Ridge subdivision. Just kind of giving a little breakdown of the different phases. The first phase it began back when this property was rezoned. We did an annexation of basically the west half of the entire parcel back in 2005. So then they started the platting process in 2007 when that first phase was final platted. That created 29 lots along the south end, which is Wild Horse Drive off of Union Road. And then the second edition, basically the ownerships changed from the original developer of Denny Weikert's to Skogman Homes Midwest Development. So they picked that development up and started the second edition in 2012, which was a larger area up near the corner of Union and 12th for 61 lots. And then a couple years ago, about this time in 2017, we did a final plat for the third edition, which is a Jacob Circle there down at the south end for 17 lots. And then at that time, when the third edition came in, they did submit development plans or construction plans for the 4th edition, which is basically a connection of the roadway of Blair Ridge Road from the west to the east. So the 4th edition is now in front of Planning and Zoning Commission for 16 lots. We're kind of working with the developer right now to lay out the rest of that subdivision, which is approximately 70 acres, which is identified as the undeveloped area to the west of this area and north of the pond. As you remember, some of the commission members a couple years ago, there was kind of some slight adjustments in the lot sizes from the 3rd and 4th edition. So the developer did take a look at that. You know, they really want to look at kind of different street layouts and lot sizes for the rest of the development. So we've been, since then, we've kind of been working with that preliminary plat. So hopefully we'll get that in front of the commission here in the next couple months just to really firm up the plans for the preliminary plat. and they can proceed developments from the 5th edition on, so on. So that was just a little background with that. So we're looking at the 16 lots on the 4th edition. Again, it's really a connection of Blair Ridge Road from the 1st edition over to the 3rd edition, which is along Rocky Ridge Road there on the east side. And it's roughly over 6 acres, 16 lots. This is all single-family developments, large lots there, 12 to 17,000 square feet, and they all exceed the RP or R4 standards for that area. Again, those lots kind of line up with the neighboring lots to the north and south of this new addition. Kind of moving along with kind of a stormwater plan. There's existing storm sewers in the area that run along the street and in the rear yard areas, and those are identified in those dashed lines. So those are kind of been set up as development occurs. So basically everything is routed through those storm sewers, and then in this phase, basically kind of run those stormwater in easements along the back of the lot lines to these intakes, and then that will eventually flow into the pond down at the southwest portion of this development. So as the lots are developed, more lots come online, so to speak. So really it kind of adds to the maintenance and repair of that stormwater basin down there. So it's not just one subdivision, it continues as that area grows. So they all become part of that area-wide subdivision or stormwater basin down the corner. So their stormwater plan meets our requirements. So moving along, the 4th edition is consistent with a subdivision code and preliminary plat, and we recommend approval on that.
Great. Thank you, David. Is there anyone representing the applicant that would like to address the commission on this? Please give your name and address.
Yeah, Kevin Fitro, Skogman Homes, 2922 Arbors Drive. I don't really have anything to say, but here to answer questions if there are any.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to address the commission on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission.
Seems pretty, makes sense. Connect the roads that are there, right?
Right. I was following the preliminary plat pretty closely, so seems like it's pretty straightforward.
I would move that we approve.
A second?
Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. And we have all eyes on that item also, so that passes. David, is that going to City Council right away?
Yeah, we're working with the developer to see if we can make that next council meeting for the improvements to that subdivision.
Great, thank you very much. Our next item of business is the Prairie Winds 5th edition final plat, and David, this one's you also, right?
Thank you, Mr. Holtz. Yeah, so this next subdivision is the final plat for the Prairie Winds 5th edition, located west of Ironwood Drive off of Hudson Road and Eric Road. So just give a little bit background on this. The property is located in R1 zoning district, as well as the rest of the Prairie Winds subdivision, the Prairie West subdivision. They're located along the west side of Hudson Road. And just again, this is a larger subdivision that was broken into smaller phases, and just gives a little background on when this was developed. The first edition, which is along the south edge, kind of adjacent to the Meadows edition off of Eric Road, which was Prairie Winds first, platted in 2013, which is 40 lots. And then at the west end of Verwai, we had additional 4 lots there in 2014. Third edition was made that connection of Ironwood Drive from the south to the north, kind of in the centrally located. That created 13 lots. And then last August, we did the 4th edition, which is located up in the northeast corner of this. And then the 5th edition is off of Flynn and Vera Way again, which is 27 lots. So the future, the rest of it, which is approximately 46 lots, I think we want to look at a connection of Ashworth Drive from existing terminus just off of Ironwood over to the west, so it connects into the street there to access the elementary school, the Aldrich Elementary School to the west of this. So that's something we'd be looking at in the future for next phase. It could be all 46 lots or a portion of that, but we just want to make sure Ashworth is part of that phase. So moving in with actual fifth edition, just over 11 acres, 27 lots, set up for single-family dwellings. One element I want to just kind of point out with this is between lots 11 and 12 there off of a Cohen Road is identified as a 10-foot pedestrian connection, so it's a 5-foot easement on both of those lots to make up that 10-foot. So really what that's set up for is a nice sidewalk from the end of Flynn Drive to cut through those lots to gain access over to the school as that is developed, again, for that next phase. So what the issue here is that easement really crosses a drainage way that runs along the westerly edge of that plat. So staff has been working with that developer. Instead of stopping this sidewalk essentially to that drainage way, we want to add that cost to the next phase of the development, if you can kind of follow that. So then you can put the entire sidewalk in at once instead of having a dead end that really stops in front of a pretty wide drainage way along the back of those lots. So they're going to design a crossing, probably a couple pipes that can go through the drainage way and then put the sidewalk on top of that. So we want to make sure that those owners of lots 11 and 12 have an understanding that there will be a sidewalk there that's intended for passage of kids to get to the school, access through the block, and then they would be required for maintenance, snow removal and upkeep of that area. So that's kind of found in the deed dedication. So that was just kind of one little highlight of that plat I wanted to throw out there. Again, with the stormwater routing, it really just is set up along the back of the lot lines. You can kind of see the area along the west edge of the plat. That's part of a drainage easement. Again, that will be coupled with the next phase, another drainage easement. And everything kind of flows to the south, down through the yards, and then into the storm sewers. And then eventually it goes into existing basins at the corner of Vera and Ironwood Drive, so it empties in, and then it kind of goes to the next one and then the next one. And eventually it heads south into the east under Hudson Road, and then eventually into the Dryrun Creek, south branch of Dryrun Creek, there by the industrial park. So the detention plans have been reviewed and set up and approved for improvement on those in this subdivision. So again, moving along with the plat is consistent with the subdivision code and the preliminary plat, so we'd recommend approval.
Great. Thank you, David. Anyone representing the applicant that would like to address the commission?
Marty, I'd just like to let you know I'll be abstaining from this item.
Yeah. So
Steve
noted, Winkert is abstaining.
Thank you. Steve Trosky, CGA Engineers, no presentation, just here for questions. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Steve. Is there anyone else who would, here tonight, who would like to address the commission on this item? See none, we'll bring it back to the commission.
Looks good to me. I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? See none, we'll go ahead and vote. And we have all ayes and the Wingert abstention. So that motion carries. That brings us to our last item of new business tonight, which is the Imagine Downtown Vision Plan. And Iris, you're going to introduce this item, correct?
Yes, correct. So as you are all hopefully aware, the draft of the Imagine Downtown Vision Plan was released for public review on September 26th of this year and is available for viewing and download on our project webpage, www.ourcedarfalls.com. So we're here tonight to collect input from both the commission and the public, but before we open that up, I just kind of wanted to go into a little bit of background and provide some highlights of the plan that I just wanted to bring to your attention, and for those watching, really encourage again to read and kind of give you a sense of what you'll find in this document. So on Wednesday, September 25th, immediately following the regularly scheduled P&Z meeting, There was a presentation of the public review draft, followed by a Q&A and open house, where the public was encouraged to review the plan in detail and provide feedback. Our consultant at that meeting did go through some of the highlights of the plan, touching on a lot of the details. That presentation is also available on the website, so if you'd like to view that and get a sense of more detail of what's in there, I highly recommend going to our website and watching that video. The document itself that's under review is based on an extensive public input period from the project kickoff that occurred back in April and a community design charrette in June, and that charrette was a week long, so it was a very intensive public input session. So the plan itself, again, is based on those ideas and directions given from the public. The plan, the intent of the plan is to provide a roadmap for growth and development in and around the downtown and into the future. The plan is that this document would help establish a general framework for public policy decisions moving forward. So it will be used as a base as then we look at making some zoning changes and updates to the downtown and areas surrounding it. So again, very important document. Again, really encourage individuals to take a look and provide feedback. On this slide, you will find the table of contents from the plan. The document covers items such as the public involvement period, looking at how input was collected and what type of activities we had. Covers ideas for missing middle housing, the type of housing unit that we don't have very much of in Cedar Falls. So kind of ideas of how we can incorporate that into our city. There are a lot of what-if scenarios. So based on what we heard, different ideas and directions were given on types of development. So based on those ideas, they proposed, again, a few what-ifs. So in the plan of how things could develop if it were to move forward this way. So again, those images are not dictating what will happen, but what could happen. So those are not something that, again, will happen. So just wanted to, if you see your property on one of these maps being redeveloped in this way, that's not the intent. Again, it's just a what if of what potentially could happen. And then also character areas. So again, the plan looked at the downtown and neighboring areas and try to create basically districts, trying to figure out what characters or distinguishing features made certain areas, and then basically tweak codes or recommendations based on those areas, so it's specific to those areas and not just an overarching rules that carry through the entire document, because each area is unique, is significant, and should have their own considerations. So kind of tying into that, I wanted to show you a map from the plan that does delineate the different character areas that are proposed. So again, I really recommend you take a look and see what your thoughts are on that. Again, these boundaries are based on what we've heard from the community, but of course, looking to get feedback and see if what we're presenting here captures that in essence. So the character areas, just kind of running down the list, focus on the general downtown. So that would be kind of the orange areas. That's just the kind of like the urban growing hub in some sense. And then to the red area, the parkade, so our historic district there in the middle. And then it kind of transitions out into different areas, ranging from, the East Park neighborhood to the northwest riverfront area to the southern gateway. So each of these areas in the plan have a unique kind of analysis of what they are, what could happen, what we want to happen, height restrictions. They talk about walkability, accessibility, scale, and the vibrancy, the feel of what it should be walking in each of these areas. So again, really recommend taking a look and seeing if those are, if you would agree with those. And then lastly, just wanted to touch on the recommendations, overarching recommendations from the plan. So I won't read these, but I did want to put them up on the slide. But again, the outcome of the plan would be following these recommendations. So the items listed in the report kind of follow under one or multiple of these items. So just wanted to bring that and kind of give a brief overview of what you can find in the document and the type of details that are in there. So again, very important document. Definitely encourage everyone to take a look and let us know what you think. So with that, Again, staff is today looking to collect feedback from the commission and those from the public. And we anticipate that, based on what we hear tonight and just in general, we will bring this back to the next P&Z meeting, hopefully for a recommendation. But that'll depend on the feedback that we get. So, but that is the intent, is today just to collect feedback, and that feedback will then be forwarded to the consultant to consider and potentially incorporate. So I just wanted to open that up then to the public and the commission.
Great, thank you, Iris. So, yeah, at this time, I would open it up to anybody here tonight who would like to make a comment or ask questions of the staff, et cetera, on the Imagine Downtown proposals. Please come forward and state your name and address.
Hi, Carol Lilly with Community Main Street, downtown Cedar Falls District. For the past 32 years, Community Main Street's partnership with the City of Cedar Falls has allowed the downtown district to flourish. Knowing that this visioning plan, once adopted, will be used as a guide to update city ordinances, we recognize that this is a pivotal moment in the future development of the downtown area. Yesterday was the first opportunity that our board had a chance to get together to meet as a group and discuss the draft a little bit. So we take our responsibility very seriously to be a voice for the district, so we're not prepared at this point to provide any comments, but we did want to let you know that we were looking at the document, reviewing it, and we do plan on providing some feedback at the next planning and zoning meeting. We have a small group that is kind of tasked with taking a look at it, and our full intent is to be able to confidently support the plan, and but we just want to make sure that we have had a chance to really go through it as a group. So that's kind of where we're landed.
Is that enough time, Carol, for you to?
We've got a group getting together next week. So yeah, we will be prepared at the next P&Z meeting.
Feel
to provide
comfortable
some
doing
comments.
that? Okay.
Thanks.
We always want to get your comments.
Yeah, and again, appreciate the amount of public input that has been provided and the amount of outreach that the city staff has done. They've done a really good job, so thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Invite anybody else who would like to discuss this item to come forward. Your thoughts or questions or anything? You sure?
John Roth. I live at 4212 Sterling Lane, but I have a business on South Main, or I guess it shouldn't be South Main, 21st and Main. I just, one comment just in general, and I apologize, as I was talking to one of the staff before the meeting, I really haven't had a chance to review the full plan, much like Community Main Street, and I will be anxious to hear their comments. But I was a little concerned. The plan talks about Imagine Downtown, and it's hard because as a resident of Cedar Falls and a business owner on Main Street, this plan and its recommendations stretch quite a ways further south than what most Cedar Falls residents consider downtown Cedar Falls. It goes all the way to 18th Street on some of the recommendations and potential zonings and drafts in there. And just a little concern that most people and the limited public comments, at least in my opinion, I think there were 63 people, if I've read some of the things that actually input. We've got about 40,000 residents, and that's a pretty small, if you can even call it a percentage of the residents that were commenting on this project. And so just to take time and figure out what are we approving, what are we recommending going forward. My biggest concern, I truly think we do need to look at zoning downtown, and I leave that to much smarter people. A lot of you guys have all that education and ability in real estate, but I'm more concerned about the thoroughfare, the Main Street, and doing something that would impact the businesses up and down Main Street. There are a significant amount of businesses from University all the way up through 6th Street that could be impacted if we change that thoroughfare, that Main Street road, limiting the ability for people to get there. I understand people want to walk, they want to bike, but let's face it, 99% of the traffic on Main Street is still through vehicles. And we need to make sure that those residents, customers, visitors have the ability to get to Main Street because it's a small percentage that can actually walk or bike there as opposed to the number of cars that are on that road a day. So I just want to make sure that the commission thinks that through, whether or not 6th Street through 18th Street, any of that should even be part of this visioning or recommendation. And again, I just kind of defer to you guys, and I will take some time over the next couple of weeks before your meeting to go back through the full recommendation and plan and just make sure it makes sense, because if not, we need to get other voices in here to make sure we are understanding what impacts this may have, so that's all.
So, yeah, so John, I mean, the recommendations do extend, like you said, out to that kind of 18th and Main Street intersection area, that type of thing, and you're kind of right there.
Yeah.
Are there things that you definitely want to see or don't want to see, or?
You know, this came up about a year and a half ago. We talked, there was a vision or a discussion regarding Main Street, redeveloping Main Street. It's on the list up here in a couple of years, and I know we already applied for a grant from Northland and have some of that. I'm really concerned, you know, about shrinking that road down to 3 lanes. There's a lot of traffic. I believe it was just roughly about 10,000 vehicles per day on average. That's a lot of vehicles to go down to effectively 2 lanes. I know they talk about 3 lanes in this quite a bit, with it one being a turn, but that's really 10,000 vehicles in 2 lanes going each way, and putting bicycles on that road. And probably a big concern of mine is, after raising children in this community and having a junior high 2 blocks off and a high school not too far off, and a lot of those kids, very inexperienced drivers, use that Main Street to get to and from school, and having limited, you know, room, a smaller road, and putting bicycles on that same road. That is a big concern for me. I also have a lot of, you know, right or wrong, elderly clients, and sometimes vision is an issue, and I have a neighboring business that has very large vehicles, semis, large trucks and trailers coming in and out of their location, and anything, and I know I'm past the 18th Street, but once you start setting that to 18th, what are you going to do from 18th to University or to Searly, and how far? And you don't want to have something 4 lanes or 5 lanes and it stops and goes to 3, and what does that cause to traffic? I think some consistency there, and just to make sure we think through what are we setting as a precedent for what Main Street from 6th Street to University or 6th Street to Searly will ultimately be, because I know that is an agenda item in the next 2 to 5 years with the city, is to replace Main Street. And putting bicycles on there is of concern, at least on the roadway on there, especially when we have dedicated bike lanes within 1 to 2 blocks and east and west of that, both ways, where there are very good alternatives for it. So it's kind of a general comment, and just thinking about how it affects my customers and myself and staff and everybody in between. So that's all.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. I have heard a lot of comments on that particular item so far. That seems like it's going to be one of the hotter topics of the.
I apologize. It was one of the things that last time when the engineers went to make a recommendation. Sorry. 2 years ago, when the engineer did a study on Main Street and made a proposal on how to replace it, one of the things they never started in that study was what type of bike traffic would be on there. Yet they made a recommendation to put dedicated bike lanes on that road. So then as part of that, they went back out and did some intermediate studies on 3 days and found a very, very limited use of that road. And I brought it up to City Council at that time about why would we dedicate X percentage of the cement and right-of-way to less than 1% of the traffic. And, you know, it's just some thoughts. I want to make sure, I'm not saying I'm against it, but some of this is we as city staff, city government, city commissions, we have to think about what's right, what's the right use of money, how much do we dedicate to this, what's the safety involved with it. I mean, I don't want bikes on Highway 58, and not that we're proposing that, but where does it start and stop, and where's the appropriate use, and is there a better alternative? Much like, you know, we've got roads like Green Hill Road, and, you know, and have extended Green Hill Road, and we put a large 10, 12-foot wide sidewalk where bikes and pedestrians can all use it at the same time in a safer manner. So that's just my comment, and I think a lot of citizens would believe that's a safer alternative that still accommodates that, as opposed to putting them right on the street. But that's just, it's more regarding safety there.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks.
Thank you, John. Invite.
Hi, I'm Mike McCallum. I'm co-chair of the Pedestrian and Bike Committee for the City of Cedar Falls. And what this gentleman's talking about is a road diet. And I am supportive of what this visioning is looking at with the road diet. Just came from spending a few days in Brighton, Michigan, where ironically they have a street called Main Street in which they have done the same thing. It's also the main feeder road to their high school and to some of their junior highs in that particular city. Seems to be working fine. In fact, on Sunday, they had hundreds of bicyclists on the road, sharing the road with motorists. And so I am in support of this. And there are many cyclists in this area who are also in support of it.
Do you think is there advantage or disadvantage to, like John was just talking about, having, you know, the wider multi-use sidewalk that's pedestrian and bike versus having the bike lanes on the, integrated with the roadway?
I think both have their arguments to their benefits. I believe that this is new to this area, but it's used in many cities around the country. I've been to a lot of those cities, rode in those, and for years, I'm a 30-plus year resident of Cedar Falls, have rode on Main Street for a number of years in its current situation on my bicycle, and really I never felt threatened. The nice thing about bike lanes is studies have shown they make a cyclist feel 60% safer when it is a marked bike lane than they would at any other time, being in an area that doesn't have sharrows or bike lanes. So whether they are or not is up for debate, but studies have showed that they feel safer.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else with a comment or question? Well, seeing none, I'll bring it back to commission for further comment, discussion, questions.
Appreciate the thoroughness of the study and the public participation. That was clearly important. We never get enough people at those things, but it's not for lack of asking, I know.
I guess I would just have a question. We have a pretty extensive trail system in Cedar Falls, bike and pedestrian. I'm purely asking this question, I'm not for or against it. What is the benefit of having the bikes on the actual street versus having them stay on the dedicated trail systems, that kind of thing? I really have no idea. Yeah, sure. Yep, that'd be great if you could. Or if staff knows, or...
Well, I can maybe, Mike wants to chime in here. You know, we got a lot of off-road trail, recreational trails throughout the city and the metro area. There's only certain areas that those can fit within the right-of-way or parks and all that. And those do provide that leisure activity for all type of users, from kids to adults. But then you get to locations where it can't be separated. It's got to be on road. So that's where we look at on-road facilities, type of roadways, speed of roadways. It does provide a good use for those commuters, those bicycle commuters. And, you know, there's a lot of bicyclists probably in the higher, I would call it A or B cyclists, that are comfortable using those instead of the road. And like as Mr. McCollum said, it provides a little more presence that the drivers and the riders they know they're there, so it's kind of safer, it's more comfortable for those type of users. So again, it's providing those connections and those corridors for commuters and those other users. Mike wants to chime in.
Actually, if I can add too, the City Council also adopted a complete street policy, which does include bikes. So the idea being that not only for recreational use, but those commuting to work or, you know, using streets or other forms of transit, walking, biking, that is a big push that we're trying not to be so auto-centric. So for health reasons and such too, we want to make it as easy as possible for everybody to move around as needed around the community. So that's the reason too, is we're not just looking for recreational use. We do have a great system, but if you're trying to get from A to B for work or so, having those connections are also important.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, commuter access for especially University of Northern Iowa. We have 2 elementary schools, Lincoln and St. Patrick's, that are in that area, plus all the businesses. There are a lot of Cedar Falls residents who like the option of driving, riding, or walking, and we just want to provide that benefit to our citizens.
Okay. I'm not a biker, so I'm just not familiar with that, and I was just purely curious.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In that note, when I looked at your market considerations report, it says that our number of young adults aged 20 to 24 is projected to decline by 100. And then 35 to 44 is going to grow by 800 by 2023. People 65 to 74, the aging population is going to grow by 500. So it doesn't look like our millennial or younger people population is really growing that much. Looks like we're going to be aging more. So we might want to consider that too when we're spending the dollars and putting all those dollars into the bike path. Doesn't look like the younger people are going to be taking over necessarily here, according to our market studies. And then one consideration is I've looked at this pretty extensively, and I love the idea that we're doing this visioning. One of the things that I want us to think about as we move forward is keeping the integrity of our historical nature. And I'm not one for old buildings. I don't go somewhere to look at old buildings. When I'm there, I look at them and I appreciate them. But I do like the sense of place and the ambiance and the atmosphere that our downtown has or can be. So I just want to make sure that we're looking at changing our zoning ordinances and going to form-based, that we're very cognizant of how those are going to affect. I don't want us to have unintended consequences, because we can make a lot of changes and not think about what those consequences might be. So I really am curious about how all these changes will actually affect that. Because we have a really pretty cool thing going. There are some things that need to be changed, and there are some things that shouldn't be changed. And if we change all the ordinances, what does that do to it? So,
Want to comment?
Clark Rickard, I live at 903 Main Street, and maybe I don't understand everything getting into the bike lanes. I guess my big question is, or I like having the bikes up on a path out of the traffic and all of that. I like that. But I guess what I'm looking at is if you change this, you combine the sidewalk and the bike together as one lane. Right now I've got a 5-foot wide sidewalk out front. Now I'll have a 10-foot. Two things, do I have to remove snow on a 10-foot wide sidewalk now? And when it breaks up, do I have to repair all that concrete? Like I do all the sidewalk I have now. Is that putting a lot more pressure or cost onto the homeowners? You got twice as much snow to move and a heck of a lot more concrete when you guys come around and drop paint on them.
Can you address that, Iris?
I can, yes. So actually, the plan currently is not proposing combining the sidewalk with the bike lanes. So what they're proposing actually is that street diet. So really, those bike lanes would be separated. So you'd have like the sidewalk, the standard, the grass buffer that you have now, and then a section of the road will actually be utilized for bikers.
The
So
bike
that'll
lane
be
is
city.
part of the actual main roadway.
Correct. So you would not be responsible for maintaining that area. That would still be city right-of-way, so
I guess
not
we were just throwing
additional.
out the idea of as an alternate or whatever, yeah.
I assume this whole discussion is really premature a little bit, and the Main Street kind of roadway work is a different design kind of strategy, right? This is a a more generic version of what's going to be happening, correct?
That's correct. And then just a reminder too, just so that the discussion doesn't become too zeroed in on there, it really is also about what's happening on private property. So also taking a look at, there's been some concern about, okay, so what does that mean for potential buildings and development? So I encourage those listening and those here today to, it's an important discussion, but also to think about the private side too, the buildings, the height, the character. So taking a look at those character areas as well. And it's an overall plan, not just one item. And again, like you said, it's concepts and ideas at this point. So when we have a direction, we can I guess, hunker down those specific details when it gets to code writing. And when we look at those streets, make those decisions based on the plan of what direction we'd like to go. So at this point, it's more kind of big picture, are we in the right direction? It's not deciding today that, or I guess the next meeting or whenever, that this is the route, the 100% route for that street that we're going to go.
Might be nice at the next meeting to talk about next steps a little bit more, how this does really impact what we're doing moving forward here with form-based codes or whatever that might be.
And in addition to timeline, kind of the sequence. So if we collectively come to agreement that this general plan and concept is favorable, when we do come to code writing and looking at zoning changes, that sort of thing, are those things isolated by each one of these different districts that we identify, and are they in sequence, or is it all at once, or is it all of it phased differently? I have a lot of curiosity about not as much the timing, but the sequence and the milestones to make sure that we are looking at those things thoroughly and through the right lens, I guess.
We can definitely go in more detail on that at the next meeting.
I haven't studied this as thoroughly as I'd like, but some parts of it that I really appreciate the direction it's going. And one is kind of the discussion about changing the rules of development. And I very much agree with their analysis about that existing built environment, current zoning, and the community aspirations, that there is a mismatch between some of those things right now. And so we're talking about updating the zoning and codes anyway, so that's good. And I think the analysis that we need to have more of objective measures rather than subjective measures in our ordinances now for evaluating buildings and the development and things like that. I think I very much agree with that, and I think that's a critical part of the upgrade that we're looking at. So I think one of their notes about not to prescribe specific building designs. I think we've kind of run into issues with the way we have been handling things in recent years that kind of maybe crosses into an area we shouldn't be in. So I think they're right on target with that. Adding lots of trees downtown seems to be one of the big items, and I very supportive of their thoughts along that line, and sort of the examples they've showed for how development could occur, I think are very pertinent to what we're looking at doing. So I'll find that very positive also. And then as far as the comments on parking, kind of the general framework they've laid out, the concept I think is very strong. I agree that if there's going to be more density downtown, it's going to require structured parking at some point. I've always been a believer of that. But their kind of discussion on how the parking can evolve over time, and the right kind of parking, not necessarily I think it's a good point. We may have a lot of surface parking, for instance, that's not necessarily desirable. We don't need less parking, but we need more appropriate parking, essentially, is what I've gotten out of the comments, and I agree with that 100%. I think some of the ideas that they shared for getting to that parking situation, I think are pretty strong from my understanding of it so far. So those are a few comments I had.
Yeah, after watching the presentation and now starting to digest through this document, there's a lot of exciting and innovative stuff in there. I'm excited about it. I need to digest it some more, but I'm excited about some of the innovation in there and the direction it's going.
Love the pictures. The visuals are great because it gives you an idea of what you're thinking, and so, and I love the missing middle housing portion of it. I think that's important for us to look at, too.
Well, I like what I'm seeing so far. I do agree with some of the comments made in regards to parking. Parking's always been an issue, and I think it's something that we need to make sure that we keep in mind, especially considering the fact that we're adding density to the downtown area. Also, concerned about being able to incorporate people who drive with people who bike, with people who walk to get to their destinations. So I think those are probably the 2 points that I want to make sure that we flesh out completely. And then I also appreciate the pictures. I like updating downtown. And I'm really excited about the fact that we're getting public input, and then we've got all sorts of public activities, from public kickoff to the opportunity to come in and brainstorm. I really like where this is going. Just a couple of those 2 issues that we just need to keep in mind as we move forward.
Anyone else who would have another thought?
I was just curious, we talked about this, and I think that at the presentation they talked about how much public money and dollars that this will take to implement, and a lot of this redevelopment is coming from the public side and people investing in the downtown. And I'm just curious if in any part of their plan, is there incentives, public-private direction where they cooperate and work towards those goals over the long term? Or if it's just, are we going to wait for private development to kind of kick it off and see how it goes?
So the document does talk about encouraging those type of programs. So it's really based on, I guess, what direction, City Council wants to go, what the public's, thoughts are. So if you have ideas, please feel free to comment, let us know. But that is something that the consultants obviously they don't have an answer for us in that sense, but they do encourage us exploring those options. And I think there's a section where they talk about that too. But, public-private partnerships are very, very important. So there will be both sides would be encouraged to invest and take a look. So that is something that we are aware of and working towards.
I think having the right kind of standards and framework, though, can also serve as an incentive to, for people to develop.
That does bring up one point that we should point out here with this. One of the goals that we've talked about with the plan is that in determining our new zoning ordinance, that it may mean that there are fewer site plans that run through the Planning and Zoning Commission. Time can be money. That can talk to the incentive part of it as well. It's not just offering dollars, but how can we reduce the time frame in the review by having very clear standards, which can help with appropriate presentation of what comes forward. And then there may be cases where there's something special and unique where review does need to happen. So I'm not saying all cases, but we've been contemplating how we might help with that time and clear objectives in the ordinance.
Right, as I was reading that, Stephanie, I think the comment was, there's too many subjective pieces in that, and it's causing, time and money on both sides and delay. And if we can create standards that are much more objective, so it's like you can just, you do or you don't meet it, and so we don't need to have a, commission review type of thing that can speed the process up. I think that's a very positive thing, so.
So less work for P&Z, are you going to cut our pay too?
Maybe.
Fewer meetings.
Good discussion. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? Otherwise, I guess we'll be back next meeting with this again. And we do appreciate everybody's thoughts and comments, and they can continue to, via the website, right, get comments into the city, so anybody who's interested on cedarfalls.com, the documents are all there. You have the opportunity to pass your thoughts and comments on to the city, so that can all be incorporated into the process. So I encourage people to do that, because this is really a pretty monumental time to make a pretty, I think, dramatic and positive change in the city, so encourage people to participate.
And then just for those watching in the audience, if you're interested, the direct website to the project specifically, so you don't have to look through our main portal, is ourcedarfalls.com.
Great, thank you, Iris. Well, if there's no more discussion on that, we'll call that good for tonight and look at it in 2 weeks. So that ends our new business. Is there any commission updates?
No commission updates at this time.
Great, thank you, David. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.